Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and it's Friday again. So I'm going to take a look at what the Brexiteers are talking about in the press. I'm going to leave the Express alone for a week to avoid becoming obsessed and take a look at the Daily Mail, a little bit of the BBC, but the Daily Mail and how it started to slowly turn around to the idea of letting their readers know that, actually, do you know these shortages that are about to really annoy you? Brexit's involved. And how this could be really important in getting the public Brexit conversation going again. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news in politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So I do wish people wouldn't get their news from newspapers these days. With the, I suppose, the possible exception of the Byline series. Odd thing to say, I suppose. But the thing is, like, the internet's a funny bunny. Because on the one hand, it has allowed some to spread disinformation in a way that scarcely seemed possible before. On the other, it puts us directly in touch with actual experts. You know, because we're no longer constrained by having mainstream media filter out basically information with selective reporting and spin. When I was growing up, obviously you were entirely dependent on that, really. If I want to know how the supply chain is being affected by Brexit, I don't have to hope that the BBC or any other media outlet will interview the right people, ask the right questions and publish the right responses. I can follow people who know. I can see who has been bang on the money throughout this entire process, going back years, and decide that, yeah, your information is worth paying attention to. And I can see who was talking absolute tosh and decide that they are worth listening to only for entertainment value. But there are still ifs and buts. Like, we know that the supply chain is collapsing, and we know why it is. Yes, there are a number of pressures on it. Some of them are not related to Brexit. But the pressures not related to Brexit are also present in France, in Ireland, in Belgium, in Germany, the Netherlands, and so on. But only Britain has severe shortages of food. I'm also not aware that other countries are telling their doctors to avoid ordering blood tests for their patients. The shortages of blood tubes is around Europe, not just in Britain. But correct me if I'm wrong, it's only a critical shortage in Britain. But what I am absolutely certain of is that only Britain has a critical shortage of food. Don't waste my time talking about international shipping problems from China and how Vice President of America, Kamala Harris, is advising people to buy Christmas toys now. I've not mentioned toys. I have more important things to talk about, actually, on this video. Toys is occupying a lot of my time right now, having to engage a solicitor, all very messy. Never mind. People are short of food. Thanks to this government, they've been increasingly short of food for a long time now. That's not entirely Brexit. So it was with no small measure of relief that I see the Daily Mail, even the BBC, finally using the word Brexit when talking about shortages. Gone is the blame on the pingdemic. I mean, how do people not read these papers as well and go, oh, pingdemic's terrible thing, oh, it's causing these shortages? And then when the pingdemic went away, did they not think to themselves, I thought it was the pingdemic's gone away, I thought it was pingdemic causing these shortages, but the shortages have actually got worse since the pingdemic. How's that happened? Because it doesn't exist anymore, and yet the shortages have still got worse. It's almost like it not had nothing to do with that, but that wasn't the key cause. Now, don't get me wrong. The Daily Mail in this article is still saying it's a combination of Brexit and COVID. I mean, to an extent it is, that's not a lie. Of course, they might want to point out that even without COVID, if we took that away, we would still have the shortages. But here's the thing, if you took Brexit out of the picture, we'd still have COVID, but it wouldn't be putting anywhere near enough pressure on our supply chain to create a critical shortage of food. Again, for proof of that, we need look no further than our neighbours who have COVID to deal with, but not Brexit. It's a bit like having a bruise and a knife sticking out of your arm. Technically, the discomfort you feel is down to both the bruise and the stab wound, but they're not exactly of equal concern. But slowly educating the public is better than not doing it at all. The article, which is from earlier in the week, linked Brexit immigration rules specifically with shortages of food processors and lorry drivers. It then went on to smudge the issue with international concerns, of course, without pointing out, as I say, that other countries in Europe don't have the same problems. But this is a hard Brexit paper. We take what we can get. It even quoted someone from the British Meat Processors Association saying that although COVID had an impact, Brexit was the fundamental problem. And you may ask why it's important that reports start talking about Brexit at all, especially if they're just going to go around and downplay it by making it sound like it's just one equal component of many factors. Basically, the shortages are set to get a lot worse. It's unfortunate. I really don't know how bad ultimately it's going to get, because the thing is that the government have some agency to make it worse or alleviate issues still. I can listen to people who do understand how the supply chain's going and consider, what they are saying. But at the same time, even they know it's within a range of things. The government have agency to influence it still. I'm guessing they still have the power to delay the checks on EU goods due to come into effect in October, for example. Yes, against international trading rules, but we've been in breach of international trading rules since the start of the year. In the middle of an emergency, the government could probably continue to get away with it a bit longer. I've not heard of any major pressure from China or the US to apply those checks now. But if they do apply them, our supply issues get a whole lot worse. We already can't produce food now, or not enough food. And I don't mean in the sense that we are reliant on food imports. We can't produce enough food to feed ourselves. We have needed food imports in Britain for like 2 centuries now. I mean in the sense that we aren't producing as much as we used to because of staff shortages. And no sign of the Brexit gammons offering to do these jobs, I notice. I've not seen Nigel Farage rocking up to a chicken factory or offering to train as a lorry driver. And it's not just about shortages in food production. We're also struggling to move it around the country as well. In fact, we were alerted to that problem earlier. So it is going to get worse. We've pretty much used up our pre-Brexit stockpiles and are now seeing the problems of Brexit. And people do need to see that, because as it gets worse, the shortages will move from noticeable to tedious to annoying to frustrating to problematic. And I mean for middle class voters. I do keep worrying about those who struggle the most, but the government doesn't care about them. In order to get the government to change a particular tack, it has to be something that affects the people they do care about. Think about why the government increased universal credit during the pandemic lockdowns last year and are due to remove it again at the end of next month. It wasn't out of any sense of fairness. It wasn't out of a sense of thinking, well, it costs more to be in a pandemic. It was to avoid having all of a sudden a load of middle class voters were about to go into the universal credit system. And they didn't want them experiencing the full cruelty of our Tory benefit system firsthand in large voting numbers. They're removing it now because they judge that the number of such voters who are stuck in that system still has dropped below a politically sensitive level. That's all there is to it. Same thing with these shortages or any impact of Brexit. It becomes a problem for the government because they're not going to do anything about it until it becomes a problem for them. And it doesn't become a problem for them until it hits enough people, especially of the people who inform their policies. So when these people start suffering from the shortages, even if that suffering is limited to having to wrap their own sausages with bacon this Christmas, though it's likely to be more severe than that, well, at that point, it's important that they know Brexit is responsible. Because if they are, the problem with this government is it just thinks, and unfortunately it's had a lot of positive reinforcement of this view, all they have to do is misdiagnose a problem, say, oh, it's caused by, problem A, it's caused by impact A, consequence A, whatever you want. So we will apply a solution that in some people's heads logically would deal with problem A. But the problem is that's not the problem. But people give them time to apply the solution and then it doesn't do anything. Then they just go, oh, it's actually caused by this thing. So they allow the government to apply another solution. And it just goes on forever and ever. People need to know that Brexit is responsible so that when the government say what they're going to do about it, people will need to go, that's not dealing with Brexit. No, you apply a solution that deals with Brexit. It needs to be part of the conversation again. There was a huge public conversation around Brexit for a while. People got sick of it. I accept that people got sick of it and probably still are. And that's why they voted Johnson a whack high majority so that he could actually inflict it upon them for the rest of their lives. but it needs talking about again. People need to start asking themselves if Brexit was worth the shortages. They need to ask what they got in return for the shortages. They need to ask their Brexit supporting friends and family, or at least the ones who can reasonably be talked with about. I'll be honest, I'd hoped that the conversation would be robust from the start. I'd hoped we might have moved further than we have. But we are at least moving. And we are potentially moving in the right direction. Brexit has still got an awful lot more terrible things to do to us, and it will. And more still if the next general election goes against the national interest. Don't even want to think about that. But Brexit mouthpieces have stopped saying how great it is and turned to either blaming others for it or adding it to a smorgasbord of international pressures to downplay the impact. But what they're not doing is saying how Brexit is great. They're also no longer denying that Brexit is responsible for some very serious downsides right now. The Express, the Mail, the BBC even, have now started talking about Brexit being responsible for shortages. And remember that it's shortages that will make people take notice, if anything can at all. There's a whole swathe of the population that will just never come around, just have to accept that. But the ones who will, they won't notice the economic impact. They won't notice our international reputation suffering. Boris Johnson suffered humiliation last week in getting no concessions from President Biden at all. Utter humiliation. You've now got Conservative MPs going, we have no relations around the world. Though this special relationship is an absolute nonsense. I mean, I could have told them that years ago. Craps the bed with Europe. We have no influence in the world. Tory MPs are now publicly saying that. Johnson was shown to be completely without influence on the international stage. And yet, how many of the public even know that or care if they did? I can talk about the big picture all the time, and I will. Impacts of Brexit that will affect all of our lives, but in a way that's not clear to see. But shortages are what will make people decide that something must be done. Shortages are not something that people will tolerate. They'll tolerate an awful lot of rubbish. We've seen that. Frog in boiling pot. But shortages like this, they won't. And they'll know something must be done. And if they know the shortages are even partly down to Brexit, they'll know something has to be done about that. Persuade people that Brexit was a bad idea and they think, well, it's done now. I wish it could have gone the other way. I accept that it wasn't a great idea, but it didn't. It's like watching your team lose in a big final. You wish it had worked out differently, but you know what? There's no turning the clock back. That's how you rationalise it. But people will be less sanguine about empty supermarket shelves, about reduced consumer choice, about higher prices and no higher wages to go alongside them. But those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, please also click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.